I know what you're thinking. What things can make an airport dangerous? I mean, yeah, you're thinking right. But try to imagine landing at an airport where the runway ends at the edge of a cliff, or where the pilots navigate between giant mountains in order to fall prey to hurricanes. And I am not telling you this out of a movie, but really all at the edge of one's seat experiences time and again. Places in which the boundary between safety and catastrophe is paper thin. There's more to these airports than treacherous terrain or awful weather conditions. There is a story behind each of those mysterious incidents, eerie rumors, close calls, and these latter are so unbelievable they have become a legend in the world of aviation, right down to business. But before we start, make sure you've subscribed to our channel. What makes these airports so dangerous? Seriously, who gets the idea to build a runway at the edge of a cliff or in the middle of a mountain range? It's like playing a how can we make pilots sweat the most kind of game, right? Number 1. Challenging terrain. Let us begin with the first of these culprits. You know how most airports are conveniently placed on flat, boring expanses of land? Well, some folks apparently missed that memo. Take Lukla Airport in Nepal, for example. Officially named Tenzing Hillary Airport. After the first guys to conquer Everest, it's often called the most dangerous airport in the world. And trust me, that's definitely not just some dramatic nickname. Try to picture this: a runway that's only about 1,500 feet in length. Less than half the standard length of any airport, is located at an elevation of 9,334 feet, set with a mountain on one end and open space on the other. It would be like landing an airplane on a postage stamp, glued to the side of a mountain. It's no wonder that pilots describe landing here as something between a test of nerves and a heart attack. But Lukla isn't the only airport that exposes pilots to this form of worldly doubt. Let's take a trip to France, to the Courchevel Airport. This airport lies ensconced in the French Alps and is famous, or perhaps I should say infamous, for its ridiculously short runway and steep angle. It is a little bit like trying to land on a ski slope, but not just any kind of ski slope. Its runway is a mere 1,762 feet long and rises upward at an 18.5% gradient. If you are not already confused, another way to look at it is that it's something like a hill that you drive a car over to stop. And if you don't stop in time, well, it's good that there is a drop-off at the end into a snowy abyss. This is what we call a one-shot. It's not hard to see why only some of the most experienced pilots operate here. Number 2. Weather conditions. Now add some volatile weather to the mix for the sake of argument, since a little rough terrain wasn't enough. Well, Paro Airport in Bhutan is the epitome of a deadly combination. This airport is surrounded by mountains as high as 18,000 feet, which already sounds like a nightmare. To add a little more excitement, pilots must follow a tight valley to the runway. This wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the fact that Paro only allows landings based on visual cues. This means the pilots actually have to sight the runway to land with no fancy instruments guiding them through the fog or clouds, just their eyes, nerves of steel, and maybe a silent prayer or two. Oh, and were you aware that not many pilots around the world are actually licensed to land at this runway? Yeah, it is that intense. Another place that never ceases to challenge pilots is Toncontín Airport in Honduras. This one is often pointed out for its crazy wind pattern, swirling around the mountains. Prior to landing, the pilots need to make a sharp 45-degree turn, which is climactic to your imagination. That's sort of like threading a needle while on a roller coaster. And if you think that the wind is your only concern, better think again. The altitude, over 3,000 feet above sea level, makes everything a little bit more complicated because the thin air makes it tough for the planes to generate enough lift. Number 3. Technical and operational problems. Not to mention the technical problems surrounding these airports. A few airports are situated near residential or civic areas where a small mishap will bring utter catastrophe. For example, the Princess Juliana International Airport is the St. Martin one. It's reputed for starting their airport's runways right at one end of a massive tourist beach. If you can imagine this, you're sunbathing with a 747 just meters above your head. That's thrilling for beachgoers, but it also creates nightmares for the aviators as they fight strong crosswinds with the goal of not clipping the fence at the end of the runway. A bit farther down, there's Gibraltar International Airport. Now, granted, you might assume landing a plane is tough enough without complications, but in Gibraltar, they like to keep things interesting. The runway here crosses over the main road in the city. You heard that right. Every single time that the need to land or take off arises, they have to halt traffic in the same way that you would for a railroad crossing, except for a jumbo jet. And if that's not enough, the runway is flanked on both sides with water, making it difficult even in the best conditions. One could look at it as almost landing on a balance beam too much to one side, and you have a very wet landing. The whole thing is a logistical nightmare, but somehow they make it work most of the time. Now, technically, we know why these airports are dangerous. That's the tip of the iceberg. These airports are not only foul but also haunting. A few of them have tales that would make your hair stand, and mind you, it would not be only because of the turbulence. Let's start with the unexplained things. You would not expect Kansai International Airport in Japan to pose any apparent danger, but a certain side of it is unknown to many people. The airport is constructed on an artificial island in Osaka Bay. It sounds like some massive piece of current engineering to build an airport on an artificial island, right? But here is the weirdest part: some of the pilots have reported turbulence, the kind of which moments before landing made it feel like the plane would suddenly descend a few feet unexpectedly. I mean, turbulence is common, but this one is different. Engineers and meteorologists have scrunched up their foreheads trying to figure out what is going on, but there is no explanation. Some locals even believe it's because the airport sits on reclaimed land, and this has affected the sea spirits. Maybe superstition? But 30,000 feet up, this is the last thing you want going through your mind. And then there are the near misses. The kind of incidents where you sometimes leave your mouth agape, wondering how on earth anyone could have gotten out alive to retell the tale. Take Madeira Airport in Portugal, better known as Cristiano Ronaldo International Airport. Now, this is the stuff of nightmares pilots have. This runway is literally built on the edge of a cliff, so if that isn't terrifying enough, the weather here can be as unpredictable as a toddler's mood. Back in the early 2000s, a plane was coming in to land during a pretty windy day. A little while later, a gust of wind suddenly switched over, which made it yaw and steer the plane dangerously near the edge of the runway. Passengers said it was like being on a roller coaster from hell. The pilot managed to wrestle the plane under control at the last second, as passengers on board had aged every year from sheer terror. Since that time, the runway has been made longer, but the memory of it still lingers in the minds of those flying in. Now, you would want to think pilots are all the cold facts and no nonsense of the flying business, but even they have their superstitions, particularly where landing at dangerous airports is concerned. Take Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong before it was closed and replaced by Chek Lap Kok. There used to be a saying among pilots: when you see the checkerboard, start praying. The airport was notorious for the approach that would, literally, make one's heart skip as planes made a right turn way below altitude and approached in order to maintain the lane of the runway. Nowadays, Kai Tak is closed, but the stories and superstitions live on and on, handed down by pilots like ghost stories around a campfire. This means that, indeed, even in modern aviation, there's a place for a little superstition and, perhaps, a quick prayer. Now, that's all for today. So now that you know the truth about these airports, I'm wondering, would you even be brave enough to fly to one of these places? Or maybe you have already? If so, I'd love to hear what it was like. Did it live up to the hype, or was it just another day in the sky? Drop a comment below, and let's get that conversation started. Who knows, your story might just be the one that pushes someone to book or cancel that next flight. And if you will, share this video with a friend who's into a good thrill, or maybe somebody who is mortally scared of flying. Let's see how brave they really are. And if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to it. Thanks for watching.